Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise yet again to speak on Bill C-60, another Conservative omnibus bill that crams changes to more than 50 pieces of legislation into it, and which ought to have been split up and studied at various different committees. This bill will have wide-ranging impacts affecting everything from the price of an iPod to credit unions, to foreign aid, to even journalistic freedom of the CBC. This omnibus budget bill makes changes to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, to the Investment Canada Act, and merges the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade with CIDA, the Canadian International Development Agency. Mr. Speaker, this bill also raises taxes on Canadians by introducing tax hikes on credit unions, increasing the tax on small businesses, and increases the taxes on thousands of products that Canadians use every day. It took generations to establish institutions like the CBC and the central bank, and some of these institutions are the envy of the world, but this bill would undermine the collective bargaining process at many of our Crown corporations, the Canada Pension Investment Board, Via Rail, Canada Post, and the CBC and the Bank of Canada. These institutions have always been ambitious, but theirs was a vision grounded in hope and optimism, and Canadians have always known that as a country we are stronger together. Our leaders once had the wisdom to accept the independence of the Bank of Canada and the integrity of the CBC. They saw this independence as an asset to our country, not a threat to the power of government. But the Conservatives don't trust Canadians. C-60, like omnibus bills before, are evidence of this contempt. Many of the changes in C-60 are cynical measures that will give more power to the Conservative government's inner circle while taking away the voice of Parliament from independent bodies and ultimately from Canadians. The Conservatives are making rash and ideological choices to push through Omnibus 3.0, push it through Parliament without talking to Canadians, because if they had, they would have heard, Mr. Speaker, the kinds of things that I have been hearing from my constituents. Parkdale High Park, the electoral district I represent, is home to many Ukrainian credit unions. I recently met with representatives from the Council of Ukrainian Credit Unions of Canada, who have a combined membership of over 60,000 people across the country. The representatives I met with were shocked that they were not consulted in advance about these changes. These tax code changes were absolutely unexpected, and there was no comprehensive review of the sector before these changes were introduced in the budget. The changes have surprised people and created worry and uncertainty for credit unions and the many Canadians who rely on their services. In my riding, the Ukrainian credit unions invest nearly $1 million annually in community programming, projects and educational initiatives that will simply disappear as a result of these changes. There's also a great deal of concern from credit unions from coast to coast about the long-term impact of these changes. We appreciate diversity in the financial sector and the banking sectors of Canada. They're part of a modern economy, but I share the concerns of my constituents and many Canadians that these changes put that diversity at risk. But of course, the Conservatives would have had to talk to Canadians to know this. My office has also been flooded with letters and emails and phone calls from constituents concerned about how Bill C-60 will impact the CBC, our national broadcaster. Thousands of Canadians are writing to tell Parliament that sections relating to the CBC alone are reason to stop this omnibus bill, to make changes to it. Last week I received a letter saying, I don't want any politician exercising this kind of control over our national public broadcaster. It's not a state broadcaster. Another letter put it succinctly, saying, what can I do? Where do I protest? Now, Canadians have made it crystal clear. They don't support these measures, so why aren't the Conservatives listening?
Respected members of the Canadian media have been telling Parliament that this bill must be intercepted.
Free expression, la Fédération professionnelle des journalistes du Québec,
the Professional Federation of Quebec Journalists, The Guild of Media and Communications of CBC and ACTRA are calling on the Conservatives to show some common sense.
It's clear that Bill C-60 is not what Canadians want, and if Conservatives were listening, they would know that. If they had talked to Canadians, they'd be hearing the advice of experts like George Smith, who has decades of experience in Canadian business. Smith was once the chief management negotiator for Air Canada, Canadian Pacific Railway, CBC. At the Finance Committee, Smith told us, and I'm quoting, "The proposed amendments to the Financial Administration Act buried in C-60 contradict both the spirit and the intent of the Canada Labour Code and create a role for government in Crown Corporation collective bargaining, which is not contemplated in the Canada Labour Code." Mr. Speaker, on another issue of serious concern is the impact that this omnibus bill would have on the independence of the Bank of Canada. Last week, I tabled a motion at the Finance Committee to study the impact of this bill on the Bank of Canada, but the Conservatives voted against it, as they vote against every proposed amendment. However, in a recent article in the Globe and Mail, Kevin Carmichael, one of Canada's most respected financial reporters, discussed my motion and affirmed that measures in this bill could gravely impact the independence of the bank. Again, the Conservatives are willing to sacrifice the independence of our central bank and the national interest if it means giving more power to the Prime Minister's office. Another measure in the Omnibus Bill 3.0 makes changes to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. These measures are a band-aid solution that doesn't get to the heart of this government's mismanagement of the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. Experts and community groups across the country are speaking out against this band-aid solution. So, Mr. Speaker, when is it enough? Really, Canadians are saying that we don't support, once again, this omnibus budget bill. Canadians have serious concerns with the measures in Bill C-60, and until those concerns are addressed, we cannot support this bill, and we will not support this bill, Mr. Speaker. There are serious issues facing our country, but Budget 2013 does not rise to meet these challenges. It does nothing to address unemployment, record levels of household debt, or rising inequality. Instead, the Conservative government is more concerned with rearranging power to give more power to their inner circle and less voice to Canadians. So, Mr. Speaker, let's not forget what this budget isn't doing. It isn't getting Canadians back to work. It isn't going to stimulate growth. Instead, this budget is squarely focused on a job-killing austerity agenda that has made major cuts to the services that Canadians rely on. Putting people to work is clearly the best way to reduce our deficit, and there's no need to play Big Brother with the Bank of Canada. There's no need to trample on credit unions that so many communities rely on. And there's no need to spend millions in an advertising budget that Canadians don't agree with, Mr. Speaker. Instead, New Democrats know that investing in education, investing in infrastructure, making life more affordable for Canadians, and supporting small and medium-sized businesses and creating high-quality, high-paying jobs is the best way to get our economy back on track. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are counting on us. They're counting on New Democrats, and I dare say all of this Parliament, to show leadership, to bring forward the ideas and proposals that will work in the public interest, not the private interest of a few insiders. We need to put Canadians first, Mr. Speaker. This budget doesn't do it. I see my time is up. I look forward to the questions and comments of my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.